Now, at the end of last night's show, I wanted to make a very important point. Didn't go well, graphics failure, but that's giving me more time to think a bit more and refine it, because this really needs to be understood. People are so scared of lifting these virus bans. They don't realise now that in this case, the cure has become really worse than the disease, like the bans on pubs, the restrictions on restaurants, hotels, like the bans on travel within some states, or now like this crazy refusal to end the ban on travelling between states, as if hundreds of thousands of people working in tourism jobs, no money coming in, as if they don't need their jobs back very fast. Now, politicians keep saying no to lifting more bans and quickly because they've persuaded the public only too well. These bans of theirs are the only thing that's stopping people from dying in the street, because no premier wants to admit they in fact overreacted. And every premier wants to boast instead how they saved you. But how much difference have their bans really made? We need to know, because they've got to start coming off. As I said last night, I've been stunned by a new study by scientists from Melbourne University, Peter Doherty Institute, and even signed off by Brett Sutton, who's the Chief Health Officer of Victoria, the state with the toughest bans. I mean, it was Sutton who banned even golf. Victoria banned even visiting mum on Mother's Day. Can you believe that? But this study contains a graphic of cases in Victoria that I think really destroys the argument that we were saved by this lockdown. Thank you, politicians. It's a graphic that I actually think is fundamentally dishonest. I've simplified it a bit, but it shows the number of coronavirus cases by the date the patients first noticed their symptoms, as it says on the bottom there. As you can see, the number of cases fell just after we shut our borders and after warnings to wash our hands and keep our distance, and health officials had also started tracing people in contact with the sick, and all that stuff worked. You'll see where the stage 1 restrictions came in. That was just after the cases started to fall on that graphic. That's the first one, red line down. And the second one is stage 3, the toughest restrictions. And they came when what? We were 2/3 of the way down the curve. And yet, even this graphic hides the real story. It is deceptive because it lists these cases by the date the symptoms first showed. In fact, though, as the Federal Health Department says, you don't get the symptoms for days after you get infected. The incubation period ranges from 1 to 14 days, with a median incubation period of 5 to 6 days. And surely, what's most important in deciding whether the bans worked is not when you felt sick, but when you actually got infected. That's what the bans are meant to stop. So, I've now adjusted that graphic to show the likely date that people got infected, using that median incubation period of 5 to 6 days. For some it was earlier, some it was many days later. But now look at how that changes the picture. It shows that stage 1 of the stay-home bans didn't come in until well after we'd got over the peak of infections. We were more than halfway down the curve already. And the toughest restrictions, the stage 3 ones in Victoria, you know, no golf and all that, that came when the virus was essentially already suppressed. We were on top of this before the worst bans started. This paper only goes into Victoria's bans, doesn't do the other states. I'm sure the picture is very similar. Now, if there's one thing that we should have done better, it was protecting the vulnerable, the very old, from the start. The latest death today, our 100th, tells the story. A woman, 93 years old, with Alzheimer's in a nursing home. How surprising that she died. In fact, more than a quarter of the dead were from nursing homes. And half were 80 years or older. They weren't golfers. They weren't beach bunnies that need to be chased off Bondi. The bans. It seems a lot of this pain has been for no real gain. And the longer these bans stay, the more we will suffer for nothing. But let's now go to the latest bans that have become a controversy, the ones that many premiers are now refusing to lift, no matter how many people go broke waiting. Queensland, Western Australia, South Australia and Tasmania are all refusing to open their borders to tourists. They're not listening to Federal Trade and Tourism Minister Simon Birmingham.
If over the coming weeks we successfully see all of those steps taken without any then flow-on increase in the rate of transmission of COVID-19, then the states and territories who have border restrictions should be removing those border restrictions.
There is no chance that we'll be lifting those state borders anytime soon.
When Dr Young says that we can do interstate travel, we will. But we are not at that stage at the moment.
Queensland's banning it until September at this stage. It's idiotic. I spoke earlier to Daniel Gschwind. He's the head of the Queensland Tourism Industry Council. Daniel Gschwind, thank you so much indeed for your time. The Queensland government says they may not open their borders until September now. Does that surprise you?
Well, good evening, Andrew. Yes, it did surprise us a bit. We have the roadmap for recovery in Queensland, which the Premier announced a couple of weeks ago, and it certainly indicated a somewhat speedier than previously anticipated recovery pace. And we're still keeping our fingers crossed, Andrew, that the borders will open way before September. The Premier has said she will be reviewing the restrictions every month. We have 2 months before July. So hopefully the very, very low infection rates that are now prevalent around Australia will give her and the Chief Health Officer the confidence to actually open the borders.
But of course, the longer they wait, the less time people have to make a booking that your members can rely on. How important are tourists from interstate for the people that you represent?
Well, the domestic tourism market for Queensland is enormous, and that's both intrastate and interstate travel. It's about all up about $18 billion a year. At the moment, it's pretty much zero revenue that's coming into tourism businesses, tens of thousands of businesses employing about 250,000 people in normal times. So the sooner we can get that revenue stream flowing again, the better. And Andrew, we have 5 million Australians who normally go offshore every year. They're potentially in the market for a Queensland holiday or an Australian holiday, and we certainly want to give them a bit of time to not only dream about it, but also book them for the very near future.
Look, Daniel, you must know a lot of people that are trying to, well, they've been clobbered, as you say, the income's been about zero. A lot of people are trying to keep their businesses alive for when trade can resume. How hard are some people doing it that you know of?
Look, it's very, very tough, Andrew. I mean, we're an industry built on passion, built on personal commitment. Look, I can genuinely say many operators are not just in this for the money. They're in this because they believe they're doing the right thing for their, not just their family, but their community, bringing local pride into local communities, highlighting the value and beauty of the environment, looking after the environment. They're really committed, boots and all, to this industry. And some of them are hanging on by their fingernails, really. They have mortgaged their houses, they have put everything on the line. And that's not just, I must add, not just the very small businesses, it's larger businesses as well. In some cases, generations of work has gone into these family businesses, and it's been an incredible blow the last 2 or 3 months, and it's really pushed them to the edge. And we hope we can keep them all in the game. The government support, state and federal, has helped to give them at least a lifeline for the time being. But we need to see businesses able to run their businesses again and generate the revenue for the staff and for themselves.
But, you know, the premiers will say, we can't lift our borders because we're saving lives, you know. Here are people demanding money or jobs or whatever, you know, putting that before people's lives. How much credit do you give that argument?
Well, look, I mean, we have accepted, along with everybody else in the community, that we follow the restrictions, we do the right thing with the social distancing, and we remain committed to doing the right thing. Our industry is working on its protocols to make sure we can keep visitors safe when they come back into our businesses. So, look, we follow the lead, I guess, but we're certainly hoping that the holistic perspective on these issues is also considered. You know, it comes at an enormous cost. Running the health crisis and managing the health crisis comes at an enormous cost to all of us now and in the future. And we have to obviously find that point where we say, okay, we're starting to really open activities up again. We will see probably some infections and possibly some clusters of infection that we have to manage, but we certainly hope we can give the health officers around the country the confidence to say, yes, okay, now is the right time to open, and we hope that sooner rather than later.
Daniel Gschwind, good luck to you and to the people you represent. I hope sanity rules soon. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.